Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome. We've got folks already using the chat, which is great to see. Got folks in from Poland, Philly, Barcelona. I assume that's Barcelona, Spain. Virginia, Massachusetts. I'm in the Bay Area, California, so it's good to see folks jumping on in. All right. Well, welcome all to this Confluence live learning. As some of you know, my name is Rob. I'll be doing these almost every Thursday at this time, 6 a.m. Pacific. I do want to let folks know that we have daylight savings here in the U.S., so the time might shift by an hour slightly sometime in March. So if you're following these regularly, please just double check the time wherever you are to make sure you sign in at the right time. I would hate to miss you due to that oddity of our clocks. All right, we've got, Barcelona, Spain. Thank you, Ivan. There is a city near me called Dublin. There's a Dublin in Ireland, and there's a Dublin in California. So sometimes I just double check which one folks mean. We are going to get started with, like we normally do, slides, which are so very exciting, and I know we all love them. But for me, they are an important aspect of this whole thing, just to make sure we're all grounded. And we do actually have someone from Ireland. I love it. So we're going to pop into some slides. We'll just get oriented on what this is all about as soon as I can find the right slide deck. And then we'll get started with Confluence 0 to Hero. This particular course started as Confluence for Beginners. And then we changed the name to make it sound a little bit more exciting than just Confluence Basics. But first, who am I? My name is Rob. I've been in information technology in various flavors for my entire career, and actually just before my career, helping out with computers in grade school and all that. But I've done help desk work. I've been a project manager. That's kind of what I do now. I've done consulting. I've worked with information technology teams, human resources teams, engineering teams, support teams, sales teams. You name it, I've probably worked with that group. And for the past 10 years or so, I've had Confluence as one of the tools that I get to use to help those groups out. And what I noticed with Confluence, like many of the systems people are expected to use, there's no real training. Add volume. Is that better? I'm sorry, I think your name is in Cyrillic, so I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but hopefully this turned up a little. Please let me know if it's too loud. I did have a few of these where the volume was too high and folks were a little bit deafened. So I've been using Confluence for about 10 years, and people rarely get trained on it. My own story was I came to a job and I said, hey, where's our knowledge base? Because I was big into knowledge bases at the time. And they said, oh, we have Confluence. And they just pointed at an icon and said, there you go. That was all of my training. And that's why I made this live learning, this Basics for Beginners, 0 to Hero, as well as all the other ones. Because there's so much to this system that if you don't know, you can't use it properly. And many people that I work with even today get very frustrated by systems like Confluence. because they're unsure how to use it. Frank, thank you for helping me out there. Um, if assuming it is Alexander, I'll use that as your name, and I hope I'm saying that okay. Um, all right. I also have a lot of online learning courses. I really like teaching. I enjoy it because I get to learn, and a big part of that is the group that's in the chat right now helping me out. How to pronounce someone's name in a language I can't read. I get to learn that, which is pretty neat. The challenge with being online like this, though, is it's hard to, communicate. We're not in person. You can't raise your hand. I can't come over and show you something. So please use that chat. A lot of you have found it. It should be over to the right of me. That way. We start out just by introducing ourselves. One, just to kind of get to know each other a little. But I'll encourage you to chat when you're comfortable. Ask questions. If I'm going too fast, if the volume's too low, if you see someone else ask a question, feel free to answer it if you feel you know the answer. One thing that I think is really neat about this is the audience will start helping the audience. And that for me is a big part of learning. And as we'll talk about at the end of this, it's a big way how to learn about systems. But also, of course, please like and subscribe. Again, we're doing one of these every week, and it's kind of hard for me to come up with 52 or so ideas. So I really need your help in knowing what you enjoy. You can just tell me, hey, Rob, do a course somewhere in here. Or liking and subscribing helps as well. And I think we have people now fighting over American football. At least I assume, Emily, that's what the Eagles you were referring to. And these recordings will stay up on App Anvil's channel, so if you miss it or you want to come back, please do. But first, a quick agenda. What are we going to talk about? So we're going to start out with concepts. And these ideas are important because it will give us a grounding, a foundation to build on when we go into Confluence. For this particular training, we'll be using Confluence Cloud Premium. Most of what I show you will work in any version of Confluence. If you're on Data Center, there might be differences in screens because your version of Data Center can differ. But this particular course deals with the foundational ways of using Confluence. So most of what we see, everyone will have access to, even if you're in cloud free. Then we'll dig into things like what even is Confluence. Again, when I started, I just knew it was a knowledge base. That was it. So we'll explore that a little, and then talk about other ideas within Confluence, like spaces and content and access. These will be important for you because if you have to go look it up later, if you go into Atlassian community or go on to Google or talk to someone, you'll know the right terms to ask about. That for me is always a problem. If I don't know what a page is in Confluence, it's really hard for me to look up help for it. Or when I'm talking to someone about a problem I found, if I can't tell them where it was, what screen it's on, what I was doing, it's harder for them to help me. After that, though, we'll get hands-on. We'll jump into this premium instance and just start playing around so we can see what it looks like. So, of course, my head's in the way. So the first question I always ask is, what is Confluence? My initial thought of it's a knowledge base was a bit too, honestly, simplistic, especially now. In my mind, a knowledge base, it's like a bookshelf in a library. It sits there, it's static. But Confluence, I'll back up a little. Confluence is just a virtual space where we can put information and collaborate. It's a space where, in a physical office, we might have a conference room. I can go in and talk to people or share information. Similar idea with Confluence. Now, it can be a knowledge base. It can be a place that I store all the important documentation for my team or for my project. But that is just one way to think about using it. And what we see here is not all the ways we could use Confluence, just some that came to mind when I made this training. It can also be a collaboration platform. As we'll see when we go live, we can do things like real-time editing. We can have multiple people in one document working together. We can @mention people. We can share content. But it could also be external facing. We could have customers access parts of our Confluence to get things like how-to articles on how to use a system, or maybe release notes, or maybe something else we want to share with the public. It can be very widely accessible. Everyone in my company can access it and edit, or it could be a little bit more restrictive. Only a few people can access and edit. So when we think of Confluence, it's not just that bookshelf in the corner. It's really a lot more than that, just because it has a bunch of different tools within it. Excuse me. Now, as we go, I'll use an analogy or a story about Confluence. I think of it like a library. So you heard me use this library analogy, which for me is fairly fairly good way to think about it. So we use that to kind of understand what are these ideas. And just a quick question, you'll see these pop up as well. How familiar are you all with Confluence? Just running down the chat. Kristen, this will right now just be cloud. I'd use cloud because more people in my experience happen to use it. Most of the features that we are talking about happen to be in cloud, and I don't have access to data center right now. So that would be the biggest challenge. I really like that question though, and I'll see what I can do about trainings about data center. If you could give it a think, and if there's specific things about data center, like specific aspects of it, how to manage it, whatever, that would be helpful to know too. In terms of comfort, ones and twos, I appreciate the folks who say, I don't know anything about this. I find that can be hard. And that's the best way to learn though. So I'll encourage you as you encounter things, say, hey, I have no clue what you're talking about, Rob. That will let me dig in and really get you information. And my head's in the way again. Excuse me. I will teleport. There we go. Now, the first thing to think about Confluence is an instance. And this is just a copy of Confluence. It's what an organization would use. Thinking of my library, the instance would be the whole building. One library is an instance of Confluence. And there's two main flavors. There's cloud, which we'll use here, and that's managed by Atlassian and has different tiers. Essentially, more access to features depending on how much you pay. There's a free version, then there's a standard version, premium, and enterprise for the really big groups. Usually groups that, like a company, would be on standard or premium. The easiest way to tell which one you're on, if you have Atlassian Intelligence, their AI tool, that's premium or enterprise. For this, we'll be using premium, but again, most of what we see will be kind of standard across all Confluence. Data Center is a little bit different. Data Center is managed by our organization. That means we have to have someone who knows how to manage servers and download patches and take care of it. The advantage is we have more control. So, for example, a company working with the government might have to use Data Center because it's more secure, or they have more control over it, or some reason that the government says use Data Center. And this isn't to say that cloud isn't secure or good. It's just that with cloud, I don't have to worry about the patches and the back end. We pay Atlassian to do that. Data Center, though, requires someone to know how to manage it and maintain it. Again, most groups happen to be using cloud just because it's easier for most people. You will also hear server. This was similar to Data Center. It was installed on one machine, one computer in your organization. That support ended last year, so you probably won't run into server anymore. It's just no longer supported. So that is an instance, just a copy. Some groups can have multiple instances if they're very big, or if they have a very specific need to keep some information completely separate. Now, within an instance, we have spaces, and these are like rooms in a library. When we go to the library, there's a room for science books, or a room for fiction or nonfiction. And a space is just a way to organize our information. Typically, this will be done by project. When we have a project to install a new computer system, I might have a space to host all that information. Or maybe by team. My engineering team has a space where all of their stuff lives. But really, there's no rules around it. There's no wrong way to use a space. You do want to consider your strategy for using spaces, though. For example, I wouldn't want 7 spaces called support team. It would be hard for my group to know what's going on. In the same way, my library probably wouldn't have 4 or 5 different rooms all labeled biology books, because it would be confusing to know where to go. So when we consider spaces, it's just another way to organize information. And typically, a company or a big organization would have a strategy or a naming convention or some standardized way to use these to make sure folks knew what went in there. Hands up, who's so old you still know server versions? Ooh. So within a space, we then have content. And this is what most people think of when they think of Confluence. This is the information that someone goes in to look for. These are the books in the library, or the magazines, or the whatever you need in the library. The most common, or the one most people usually think of, is just a page. And this contains text and images and formatting. It's a policy document in human resources. It's API documentation for an engineer. It's a project brief for a project manager. But a page is exactly that. It's like a document. Now, very similar to pages, we have blogs. They look the same. If you printed them out, you couldn't tell the difference. But Blogs are better used for what I call point-in-time content, something that it happens and then you don't have to go back and ever change it. And they're also listed chronologically. I use these for things like release notes when we deploy new versions of something at work, or team meeting information, or things like that. Most people I talk to don't really use blogs, they just tend to stick to pages. But I find them useful again for those things that happen at some point in time that I wouldn't have to go back and modify or change. Now, a little bit newer, we've got whiteboards. This is just visual communication. Think of it something like a Miro, like a Draw.io, like a Lucidchart, but within Confluence. The main advantage for me of having the whiteboards in Confluence and not using another system, it's all in one spot, but it also means my team gets access to them. I've been in many companies where I get, say, Lucidchart, and someone else can't edit it because they don't have a paid license. And that's frustrating because then I have to go do it. Whiteboards is a newer feature, but it lets anyone in Confluence use it, and then we can do things like restrict its access or control it that way. And it's also tied into Jira, the ticketing system that Atlassian makes, making it very easy to plan out visually what we're going to do. And another relatively new one is databases. This lets us structure information and data. Think of it somewhere between a table and a Jira project. I use them a lot for project management because I don't want to go into Jira all the time and build out a big thing for a small or mid-sized project. But I've also heard of groups using it as a CRM or other type of platform. I actually use them to plan these live learnings too. Someone needs ibuprofen because they're raising their hand so hard about server versions. By the way, databases look like a good feature without REST API. That's a good point, Alex. Databases and whiteboards are newer, so there are some features that we might expect or think are there that are not. The only good side to that is Atlassian does seem to be releasing updates to them very regularly. There was one about whiteboards I saw earlier that lets you make curvy lines or change the shape of lines instead of them just being whatever they decide. So on the plus side, we are starting to see improvements to that product already, which is good. So I mentioned pages and blogs. Quickly dig into these a little bit more, and then of course we'll see these live. But just the big differences. Pages show up in our hierarchy or our content tree. Blogs don't. Pages also get templates, which are very important. They're pre-formatted pages. They speed up creation, whereas blogs don't. There are workarounds. You can make a page from a template and then convert that into a blog. I don't know why we can't use templates on blogs. Frustrating. Pages also don't organize chronologically. That's not their intended use. That's for blogs. And then whiteboards and databases. Again, we'll get hands-on with all these. I put these slides in just so we can see them. But we get the visual collaboration with whiteboards. And again, you can have multiple people in the same whiteboard moving things around, adding things, voting on things that they like. And then databases give us that structure. We can add columns of different types of information, free text, a drop-down, a link to something else, a name, so we can track our information. And a question for the group, what's your favorite content type, if you could pick one? So now that we know what content is, we need to consider access. Access in Confluence is layered. Basically, there's 3 different layers to our access. The first is the instance. Can you log into that version of Confluence or that copy? Similar, if you can't get into the library, it doesn't matter what else is in there, you can't get in. So in order to get into the instance, you typically work at that company and they've given you a license. This can be automated. When you're hired in, you might just get one, or you might have to go to IT and request access, and they'll provision you, give you that license. There are 2 exceptions. There are guest users, which get access to a single space at a time. Consider a consultant who you don't need to pay for a license. You can give them, temporary limited access to just one area. And then anonymous access, anyone on the internet can see. Beneficial for sharing things publicly, but also potentially dangerous if you accidentally publish something to the entire world that you didn't mean to. So once you get access to the instance, you'll need access to the space. Now, spaces have their own permissions, one of which is view. We won't dig too much into space permissions here. I have an entire training that digs into that topic. It is probably the single most confusing and frustrating thing that people run into. Why can't I see this? But within that space, you might not have access to the space, so you see nothing in it. Or maybe you can see it but can't edit things within it, or other combinations of that. Spaces are managed by a space administrator. So I'll show you how you can find who that person is. So if you don't think you have enough access to the space, how you can go figure out who to talk to. But if you can't see the space, you won't even know who the admins are. Typically, you have to work with your IT team or ask around to figure out, hey, I know there's a space for engineering. I need access. Who do I ask? And last, the content level has its own restrictions. Restrictions are just permissions for a single thing. So one page, I could say no one can see it, or I could say only certain people can edit it, or some combination. I tend to keep things as non-restrictive as I can. Again, Confluence is about collaborating. People should come in and find stuff. But there are some things like policies I don't want anyone editing. Or there are some documents that I'm not ready to share, so I'll lock them down, I'll restrict them so only I can see them. And so far, people like pages the most. But Barbara's mentioning folders, which I'll show us live. Folders, I guess, are technically content, but there's no content on them. They're just a way to organize our other content. That was a very confusing way to describe what they do. I will show us, once we get into Confluence, what folders are for. I mentioned templates. These are pre-built pages, essentially. Confluence comes loaded with 130 some templates that Atlassian made, but also vendors added. And there's a bunch in there. I'll show us how to go in and search for them and browse, but they are a way to speed up content creation, but also make it easier for people consuming pages, consuming content to find stuff. If my team always knows what a how-to article looks like, they'll know they can skip down to a certain spot to get to the screenshots or the video recording or whatever they need. So templates are an important aspect, but they're unique to a space. So I always share that because sometimes you'll find a template you like, and then it will disappear, and you don't know why. And that's because it lives within a certain space in Confluence, so you have to go find it there. And please keep dropping in questions. We've got to, don't overthink it, Rob. I try not to. Sometimes smoke comes out. You'll know I'm thinking too hard. Collaboration is another big part of Confluence. It's very easy to think of it as, I'm Rob and I'm just the only person in here, because you can't see all the other users. But I've worked at very large multinational companies where thousands of people are going to be going through Confluence any given minute. And how do we interact with them? Now, the easiest way is to comment. On a page, we can select text. It's called inline commenting, or we can comment on the entire page. I use this a lot to find typos or things that are incorrect, and I think I drive people a bit crazy. But they'll get a notification, and that comment lives on the page until they come fix it. So it's one way to interact. But another one is to collaboratively edit. You can share the editing link with someone, and they can jump in and work on the page at the same time. So I might be working on the background of a brief, and someone else might be building out the plan. Same thing with whiteboards. Multiple people can move around. You'll see their mouse on the screen. It's kind of fun. And then, of course, you can just share content. So I tend to copy and paste the link to a page. That's just my habit, but there is a button called share that will then email those people. And you can send it to entire groups if you have those set up. So the main thing to just keep in mind is Confluence is really about helping teams work together better, not just about storing information, again, on that shelf. So a couple best practices or tips and tricks that I've figured out over time. The first is you really can't hurt the system. I've tried and I still can't think of a way, unless you're on data center and you exploit some bug that crashes everything, which would be incredibly uncommon. But I keep that in mind when I use systems because it makes it easier for me to go and look around. Just be considerate of the delete feature that can be undone, but that's probably the most dangerous, challenging thing most people would see is deleting content. And even that can be restored. So you kind of have my permission to go in and poke around. Find a safe area of it so you don't inadvertently move content someone needs. But get hands-on and just remember, if you're making your own test stuff, you can't really hurt it. But ask questions. Use these trainings and the chat. And please keep asking questions in here so I can answer them. Go online and we'll talk about online resources. Talk to people at work or other people who use it. And just raise your hand and say, hey, I don't know what's happening here. Help me out. Again, I mentioned getting hands-on. That's probably the best way to learn. You'll make mistakes, and then you'll remember, don't do that. But you can also practice the things you're learning here. Did I mention asking questions? You see it on here 3 times. I got very lucky at a few jobs when we had data center, and I got very close with the Atlassian team we had, the team that managed data center, and I learned a ton. Sometimes by making mistakes and, say, deleting 10,000 tickets at a time. That was not good. But they then showed me how not to do that and how I made that mistake, and I've never done it again. And talk to folks who use it. You saw two themes here: talk to others and ask questions. So we have a little scenario. We have just joined Jayquill Incorporated. And if anyone remembers the Jayquill joke, please drop it in the chat. That's now a registered domain name, jayquill.com. Please check it out. And they've been told they use Confluence. That sounds great. We're really excited to get in. But we have questions about where do we find policies and how do we onboard. And we also have ideas on what we want to share. And we've never really used Confluence, so we have to go figure it out. So this is the very subtle transition into Confluence. As I mentioned, this is a copy of Confluence Cloud Premium. And what I'll do is just start out kind of at the top of Confluence. Up here in the top. Oh, it's not going to work. Nuts. My fun Zoom feature isn't working right now. But up in the top, there's this Confluence menu. And this will bring you to this screen. I don't use this screen. That's my own bad habit. I encourage others to use it and not have a bad habit. But this keeps track of the last pages I was editing, or maybe, other thing that's happening in this instance. You can see I'm the most active person here, so it's all my little head. But it's a way to see what else is going on. What is popular content, stuff that's being used a lot? Are there any announcements from the administrators I need to look at? It will keep track of all the stuff I've recently been at. And this for me is really useful because I'll forget, where was that page about live learning? Oh, it just remembers for me. I can also see stuff that I've worked on most recently. Again, a lot of people get lost essentially in Confluence, and this is a great way to remember, hey, what's my content? Where was I working? What do I need to go to? There is also this concept of starring content though, and you'll see some stars down here on these spaces. It's just like bookmarking something. I always recommend folks bookmark content they use frequently or spaces they look at a lot, because that bumps it up to the top to help ensure we can see it. Here I can see 2 starred spaces, and you can star them just by clicking or unclicking. But it's a great way to remember where you are. A couple of questions. Barbara has data center due to company sensitivities. Yes, that's in my mind the most common reason to use data center. Requiring additional control for some reason. The advantage that you get, Barbara, is you have that internal Atlassian team you get to go be friends with. Jayquill sounds like a Pokemon. It does. A question from Aria. Confluence use user to view a parent page. Restrict them from editing a child so that they can see. Confluence permissions inherit from the parent to the child, which prevents this type of restriction. Okay, so I will do this live in just a moment when I build a page, but the question relates to how do permissions or restrictions inherit from a parent to a child? Again, there's an entire training that I do on how to remember this, but I'll try to do this exact thing live for you when we make some content so you can see what happens. Along the top, I've got some other menus. Company Hub is a relatively recent vanilla. You'll hear me use the term vanilla Confluence. That's just what comes with Confluence. There's no add-ons. There's no marketplace apps. For this, I'll do my best to avoid using marketplace apps just so you can see what everyone gets when they use Confluence. And the company hub is Atlassian's attempt for a single place for everyone to go. So this link can appear for everyone in your company. It makes it a little bit easier for someone to find where are company-wide announcements, etc. Without this feature, you have to send someone to a space, and that can be challenging for someone who's new because they might not know to go to the My First Space to get information about onboarding. So that's the company hub. There is that home button. And again, if you're ever lost, go home, so to speak. It brings you back here, so it's a way to reorient. Quickly looking at the other menus, there's a recents, and this again just keeps track of where I've been. And then spaces. This one's important, again, just if you're looking around. And you'll again see these starred ones. So I always go through, and there's always a few spaces, human resources, or the support team I work with, that I'll tick off that I have up here. But you can also click to view all spaces, and then browse or search through other ones. So this is something I show folks just so you know it exists. Again, the biggest challenge usually with Confluence is folks can't find something. So knowing how to search through spaces is really important. And teams exist within Confluence. These can be set up. I'll have to double check the permissioning here. But you could have a team for the project you work on or something else. And then you can @mention that team and interact with that group more easily than trying to find everyone else. I mentioned apps. Very briefly, it's like the App Store on your phone. Last week, I did a training that dug into how to manage these and what they are, but these are extensions. I found these really confusing because I didn't realize they were a thing, and I thought that the features the apps gave me were just in every version of Confluence. So the next time I used Confluence, I couldn't find those features, and I was very frustrated. So it's possible that the group you're working with has an add-on that gives you additional features. I always just ask with IT or whoever owns Confluence to say, hey, what apps are we using? You'll also see them show up here, though. So we've got Aura formatting, which makes pages prettier, and Mantra, which I think is some kind of meditation app. Is that right, team? Mantra is an intranet. So again, helping make Confluence more easily accessible. One source of truth, one place to go. And then a big blue, I was going to say green, excuse me, big blue create button. So those are the top menus. Those are almost always visible. So I just remember come back to home. I'm going to dig into my personal space. And I mentioned different types of spaces. This one can be provided. Most groups have this that I've worked with, where everyone just has a space that is named their name. So I have one called Robert Heen. Sally would have one just called Sally, etc. This is the best place to go play around because it's yours. People should come here and either not have access or just expect, hey, this is Rob's stuff. I think I'm caught up. Yep, caught up on questions. So now we're going to start actually using Confluence. On the left, we'll notice there's a bunch of menus. These are configurable, so you might have more or less here depending on what your admin wants to give you. I mentioned how to find a space admin. Now, in this particular instance, I have additional access, but I can go to space settings. Most people don't have all of these items because they might not be a space admin, but everyone will have space details. And at the bottom of space details is a list of the admins for the space. So if I can get into this space, I can view it, but I can't edit, or I can only view some things, or I think there's a problem. These are the people I could go find. I might message them through Slack or email or find them in the office and say, hey, Rob, I see you're a space admin of the Robert Heen space. I've got some questions. Can you help me out? This trick I didn't know, and so I would usually just contact IT. That's usually another very safe way to get help because they are either the admin or they know how to find the admin. But back to my space. Every space has a homepage. You can see I did not do a good job at all of updating this. But this is the first place someone goes. So really what I should be doing is I should be coming in here to edit it. And I can just click on this little pencil or hit the E button on my keyboard. And now I get to the editor. Now this sidebar takes up a lot of space. So what I typically do, if you mouse over it, you can collapse it. So I can do Control or Command bracket and get rid of it, or just click the button. I personally like to keep my space that I'm writing in as clean as possible. And also when I'm on a smaller monitor, like my laptop, this sucks up way too much space. You can mouse over it and change its size. So if you want it to be really huge or really small, I'll get rid of it for now. But now I'm editing. Up at the top, I can change the name. So I might rename this. And Jayquill, just to fill folks in on my very bad joke, JQL is a way to search for tickets in Jira. Most people say JQL. I say that's silly. I call it Jayquill. There's my bad joke. So we can just rename it. Now you'll notice this little menu keeps popping up. We can do things like insert emojis if we need to. Pages can also have a status. This is one that personally drives me crazy because people don't plan through how they'll use it. So there's no standard for what rough draft means. But you might see this status on a page. And this can be a very useful signal. If something is verified, that typically means the admin or the content creator says it's done. It's good to go. It's accurate. It's safe to use. Whereas if I see something in rough draft or in progress, that's a good signal that, hey, they're still working on it. And then we have all the content. Now, what we're looking at, this is called placeholder text that just prompts me as the creator to do something. Say hello to colleagues. Okay, I'll say hi, colleagues. And then just like editing a Word document, we can just go in and add text. This little improve writing is the Atlassian intelligence. If you're using free or standard or data center, you won't see this icon. It looks like a little starburst and it's very tiny. I apologize. Or the improve writing. But you can see even here I can comment. So I might comment someone, oh, I'll pick on Jan today. And I'll hit save. And this is part of that collaboration. So even editing, as I'm working through something, if I know Jan isn't working yet, I can leave them messages. So when they come online, they'll see, hey, I need some help here. Jan can then come in and add an emoji response. I can edit it, or I could mark it as resolved. Hey, the question was solved, and you'll see that yellow vanished. One thing that frustrated me, we can't control font sizes. We can, however, make headers. I believe this was done in order to keep things a little bit simpler, and I have to assume that the very smart people at Atlassian had a very good reason for this. I don't know what that reason is, but it does simplify how I consider making pages. There's normal text, which is this font size we see here. It looks to be about 12 if you use like Microsoft Docs. But then I have all these different headings. And you'll just see that can bump up the font. The big advantage of the header, you'll notice there's this little link icon now. I can send a hyperlink directly to this header. So if I want someone to go to get in touch, I can copy the hyperlink, send it to them in an email and something else. And that will open this page and then scroll down to that exact part of the page. Now, this is a very small page. I tend to use this on much longer documents. HR policies, for example, tend to be very lengthy because there's a lot of information. You don't want to have to read through all of that. You can skip straight to these headers. So that's one of the biggest reasons to use headers. The other is it interacts with some macros to automate things, which is pretty good. App Anvil is asking if I know something. What don't I know? Ralph, welcome. Good to see you. Thank you for saying hi. Trying to catch up here. Main config flow. Oh, someone's lacking a personal space. So as I mentioned, personal spaces can be turned on at the organization, at the instance level. It's possible that that feature was turned off if you don't have one. It's also possible something happened with access and they don't have access. So you'd have to talk to an org admin to help you look into the access of that space, or ask them his personal space is turned on. But I'll do more in my follow-up post in a week or two with more ideas on how to fix a missing personal space. There are other things on this page, though, beyond just this text in the headers. These boxes here are what they call macros. I call them macros. I also call them elements. And they show up here. I've got this editing bar, which has all of my bolding and italicizing. I can change font colors and alignment. They've added highlighting, so I can make it green. I can add things like lists. But then I've got these other icons, and these insert things onto the page. So one neat feature of Confluence, I can use it to track tasks. So I might make an action item, and I'm going to @mention Rob and remind myself to figure out how a personal space can be missing. And I want to do this. I'll type in a /, and this gives me all of those macros. It's the same as clicking this little plus up here. It's the same list of things. But I find the / useful because I don't have to go up here and click the little thingy and come back down. If I type in a /, I can then search through these. So I want a date. And I say I want to do this by next Thursday. And there I've added this action item. I use this particular feature a lot in meetings. You can also add them by doing an open bracket and a closed bracket. And I'll see if I can show this to you. There we go. So the open and the close right next to each other with no space between them. We'll just insert that. So just a way to speed up. We can add links. And these links can be to other content in Confluence or outside of Confluence. Insert images and files. A lot of people ask, can we have visual content? Yes. You could upload also data, a CSV or something, within the page to keep it all there. My emojis, and a couple other formatting options, adding in a table. Someone had a question on restrictions. My default, if I click this share button, and this might look slightly different. Confluence Cloud, when they roll out new features, they don't roll them all out all at once. Sometimes people get the update sooner than other people. So you might see a slightly different icon. It will be a lock. But at the bottom of this, I can see anyone in the space can see it, or maybe I want to restrict it. Now, if I restrict this, it can inherit down. So I'll go find a... I'll come back to this in a minute with a page where we can have a child page and we can see how inheritance moves down. But if I save this, now I'm the only person that can edit it. And then I'll just click update, and that will publish my changes. So here I've updated my first page. Again, I don't think it looks very good, but it was a good example of adding all these things in and how do we edit. Now I've lost my sidebar, so I have to go to the side and expand it. And then in here I can see all the content. This is called the hierarchy, the content tree, and I can rearrange this at any time. So quickly, I'm just going to grab untitled page and drop it on onboarding. And now I can see it's underneath onboarding. So now onboarding is the parent, and untitled page is the child. This is important because it will visually organize content. If everything was just flat, there was no hierarchy, it would be hard to tell how things relate. Typically, I'll group things. So in onboarding, I would have everything related to onboarding. I'd have a thing called meeting notes. I'd have one called, API, whatever the group is. But someone pointed out in chat, they use folders. Now, typically groups say onboarding. The onboarding page itself might not need anything on it. It might just be needed to host other information. So I can click my create button and add a folder. And all the folder does is give me a way to organize my content. So I'll call this onboarding information. And if I click on it, you'll see it just opens up. It doesn't display anything. But I can put all my onboarding stuff in there. And now someone coming to this space will see, oh, onboarding information. They can click on it and then see all the onboarding information. So when I use Confluence, I'm also thinking about how do I organize stuff? Many new users will come in and just start adding documents, which is great. We want that in there, but we also need it organized so it's easier to find and manage with other people when they come in and take a look at it. Question on Jira data dashboards. I will make another onboarding page under onboarding. And first I'll talk about templates. This bar along the bottom has some templates, and if I mouse over them, you'll see like a preview. But if I click all templates, I'm going to get this big list of 143 now stock templates. I always encourage folks to look at these. You can just click on one and it will populate on the page after a brief moment. Enough time to have some coffee, and hopefully this pops up soon. Angie, to answer your question, we can pull in Jira data. I will just make a new one because that one doesn't seem to like us. There we go. And so I can see that all this formatting was just put in for me. And this is the big advantage of the template. I can find them again, click on the 3 dots, and we'll see a whole bunch of interesting things in here. I can copy a page or move it. I can export it as a PDF. I can delete it. And many of these options can be restricted at the space level. So if my space admin doesn't want me to have delete, I might not see that. One thing I will point out is version history. Confluence will keep track of every change made to a page. This is very useful because if I make a whoopsie and I have to roll back the change, I can just restore a particular version. Many groups find this very useful too for like audit and compliance purposes. They can come in here and see how their policies have changed over time to prove to an outside auditor that yes, we made the update you required, or here's what it looked like in the past. But I need to very quickly pull in some Jira data. I'll just do that / to bring up elements. I'll just type in the word Jira, and we'll see a bunch of options relating to Jira. We can create a Jira issue from here. And again, this is just what's available from standard Confluence. There are apps that give you other macros, other elements. But if I click Jira issues, I can then search with basic search or use Jayquill. But maybe I want everything from, I think ERP is a demo. Yep. And I don't want it as a list. I want it as an inline link of some kind. So we have some options here on how we want to display this, what columns. And then I can just insert it immediately. So this is the quickest way to integrate Jira with Confluence. Again, there are other options with different marketplace apps, so you can get more complex and more sophisticated. Yeah, I don't have out of the box like a dashboard out of Jira, but I can pull in a filter, for example. You will notice that the share icon is locked even though I didn't lock this page. Again, this is confusing for folks. A parent has a restriction on it. That onboarding page might be restricted, so all of the children will get a restriction. So this is telling me it inherited that restriction down, and if I pop up to onboarding, even onboarding is restricted. How high up does this go? Click on share. Aha. This is something most people don't notice. If there's a little link right under the restricted by parent that will take you to the page with the restriction. So this is where inheritance can be really confusing and annoying. This can take me right to the parent, and then I can fix the restriction here. Maybe I'm going to open this up. I made a mistake. Now I can say anyone can view, or I can say anyone can edit. And again, exactly what you see in your instance might be a little bit different because they have been changing the user interface, the UI, with permissions. Quickly talking about whiteboards, and I have one more slide to babble on about. Again, this is visual collaboration. So I can take this link, and if I even open it up in a new window, it's going to look a little bit silly because we'll see two Robs show up. But in the top right, you'll see my icon. Oh, does that not happen anymore? Oh, man. There we go. So up at the top, I can see the other Rob is in here. And I can see where their cursor is. So I use this a lot. I have teams I work with in India, let's say. We're building out a new structure for something. They'll come in and start filling in the names of things as I'm building out all the icons. Now here I can just click and drag to add new shapes. You can do voting, which I think is pretty neat. I haven't really used this a lot, but we might say, what's your favorite icon? And probably a better example would be vote on a feature we should do, something like that. But this then allows people to put votes in on different things. Yes, I want to end the voting. Thank you. It does track all the results, too, for all your votes. Most groups I work with use this for either planning out like a process or doing something like a sprint planning and project management. But it does integrate directly with Jira, so you can pull Jira issues in and visualize them right here. You can also pull in other Confluence pages and visualize them. I use this a lot when I'm planning out changes to a space, and I want to see how pages could relate to each other. So I just click and drag. But again, think of this like a replacement for a Miro or a Lucid chart, that kind of thing. Okay, goodbye, second Rob. And then I spoke about databases. So here's just a very brief example database. Again, I use them a lot for project planning. So I've got tasks listed here as text, but then they might have a status. Oop, come back. It's in progress. And then there's a specific owner. I can add more columns, and there's different types of data I can put in. Media, so I could have images. Or you can actually link to pages and pull in information about the page. What's the status of the page? Is it in progress or done or verified? I can pull in Jira issues and then pull in fields from that issue. So I might pull in all of my epics and their status, or all of my epics and their priority to see them visually, to plan them. And I can also tie into other databases. So for these courses that I do, I plan out just the courses, but then I have to connect them to a certain date on the calendar. So I'll have a separate database that has all the dates I want to do a course. And then I can pull in just the slide deck link or the status of the course or something. So I use multiple databases to share information between them. But at its core, think of it like a more useful spreadsheet is the shortcut way of considering it. Yeah, sorry, data center folks. Whiteboards aren't on data center. Sorry. Okay. Am I missing any questions? You can insert dashboards with smart links from Marcus. I think they rebranded these shortcuts at some point. But you can include any link in here. I'm I'm trying to think of if I have a good example. Did I still have? That was my thinking music. All right. So I'm just grabbing a random Jira ticket. And I'm grabbing a ticket because I don't have immediately available a dashboard. But you'll notice as I pasted it in, it's not just a hyperlink. It's not just a regular link like this. You can click on it and configure it, and you can change what it looks like. By default, it's inline. It's this nice little formatted shape. But I might make a card, again, that shows more information. And from here, I can actually interact with that ticket. I can move it to a different status. Or maybe I embed it as a whole ticket. Well, I'm not logged into Jira, so I can't show that to you. Apologies. But we can do similar things with that dashboard in Jira. Just grab the hyperlink, paste it in, and then we can manipulate it. Okay. I didn't lie to you because I didn't say there were no more slides. There's a few more slides. I always talk about what's next. So we'll use the next couple minutes to go over questions, but I'll jump back into Confluence too as things come up. Next steps, go check out Atlassian's community. I briefly mentioned this way at the start. An online forum, message board, etc. for folks to ask questions, get help, get free training. All of Atlassian's training is free. You do need an account. I do recommend using a personal email. And I say that because if you use a work email and you leave that job for any reason, you lose access to your community account. I've lost multiple accounts that way, so I finally started using a personal email. You can merge accounts, it's just a bit of a pain. But go explore Confluence. Go log in and go play around. Again, it's really hard to break. Be careful of buttons that say delete. And if you are an org admin, you have super admin access, be extra careful because you can actually do some damage there. Most people don't have that level of access though. I, for example, have never been an org admin where I've worked. That means I can't do a lot of things, but it also means I'm safe. I can't make those mistakes that will catastrophically damage something. So go get hands-on, go play with it. You can also get a free instance on your own. Just Google something like Confluence free instance, and you can go get your own free version. It doesn't have every feature. It doesn't have things like permissions or the AI stuff, but everything that I showed you today, except the artificial intelligence, you can go play with. Check out my content. Again, these are every Thursday around 6 a.m. Pacific. Be on the lookout for a brief time change in March. It'll go forward or backwards an hour. I always forget which way. But almost every Thursday, I'll be doing one of these. So please let me know what you're curious about. And I just lost my key light, so I look a bit darker. I'm sorry. These are also recorded and stay on the channel, so you can always come back to it. Or if you miss one, come see what you missed. Maybe you're curious about marketplace apps and you want to go see what those are all about. But also check out other people's content. I'm not the only person talking about Confluence, and getting more perspective from more people is always good. You're going to learn things in different ways and pick up other things. Emily H. is saying, looked into changing. I assume you're referring to your community account. It is a very long process, so please don't make my mistake. Please use a personal email so you keep access. But also, talk to people about Confluence. Please make sure that you're chatting with other people at your organization or outside of it. Spring forward, fall back. That's always what I remember. At least in the States, and at least with American English, in the spring, we spring the clocks forward. We go forward an hour. And in the fall or in the autumn, we go back 1 hour. So that's how I usually remember it. But just like we saw in this chat, a lot of people sharing ideas. Like Marcus, thank you for calling out the smart links thing. Talk to others. You'll meet a lot of interesting people, maybe make some friends. There are people that I've never met who I met by using Jira and Confluence. And I call them friends, and that's really cool. But you also learn a lot from them. So please keep interacting. Emily got a free hoodie? I didn't know they were doing that. Can I sign up? I'm going to check the chat. I might have missed some questions, but as my friends at App Anvil mentioned, I'll be writing up all the questions in a response article in Atlassian community. So please be on the lookout for that, responding to questions, but also sharing my thoughts on how this training went and what we need to know to go from that I know nothing about Confluence to I can actually go use it. questions on inheritance and permissions, definitely be on the lookout for an upcoming training on access and controls. An hour is not enough time to really get into it because there's so much there, but that will really help you understand them. Config on personal spaces. I think I'm caught up. All right, team. Are there questions? I can't have answered everything. Barbara, you are very welcome. I'm so glad you came. I do want to thank everyone. You just spent an hour of your time listening to me talk about a collaboration platform. I never thought I would be doing this with my time, and I never thought I'd enjoy it as much as I do, but I can't do it with all of you. So hopefully at least one of you learned something. My success metric is one person is better, faster, stronger, smarter because of this, and that person can be me. So hopefully you all learned something, but please reach out. My information has been linked in the chat. Follow me on LinkedIn. I post regularly on Atlassian and project management. But if you've got questions or need any follow-up, great place to contact me. But thank you again all so much. Really appreciate you coming. Again, this recording will be made available almost instantly. I'm going to cut back to that amazing intro video that I can't get enough of, but I'll keep the chat open for a few minutes. So thank you all so much. Siege Lord, in my mind, I'm referencing the book Dune, the term Siege. I don't know if that's the reference, but I like your username. Thank you again all so much, and I hope to see you again here next Thursday.